On a quiet night during my hospital shift, my phone buzzed with an angry series of Snapchat messages from my neighbor, Mrs. Gable. "Dr. Carter, could you and your wife keep it down during your nighttime activities? We have kids in the next apartment. This has been going on for 5 nights straight. I knock on your door, and you guys just play dead. Are you doing this on purpose? Your wife is paralyzed and you're still pushing her like that? You bastard." Sitting at my desk, still typing up medical records, a cold sweat broke out over my entire body. I had been working consecutive night shifts for the past 5 days. I hadn't set foot in my apartment once. The moment my colleague arrived to cover my shift, I threw on my jacket and rushed out of the hospital. I dialed Chloe's number repeatedly as I sped down the highway, but there was no answer. Strangely, Olivia, our live-in caregiver who never missed a call, wasn't picking up either. Anxiety clawed at my chest, making my foot press harder on the gas pedal. Chloe and I had always been so in love. She would never betray me. Besides, she was paralyzed from the waist down. Intense physical intimacy was physically impossible for her. Then there was Olivia. Chloe had complained to me multiple times that Olivia was always on the phone with some sketchy guy during work hours. If I hadn't been so busy and unable to find a replacement, I would have fired her weeks ago. Did that girl actually have the audacity to bring a man into my home? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I flew into our driveway at 80 miles an hour. My hands shook so violently that it took me 3 tries to punch in the door code. The apartment was pitch black, filled with the sound of heavy, ragged breathing. "Chloe? Olivia?" I called out, but only silence answered. A terrible dread washed over me. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. What I saw made my heart stop. Chloe was sprawling on the hardwood floor, struggling to crawl. Olivia was nowhere to be seen. Chloe's hair and face were soaked with sweat, and her wrists were covered in raw, red friction burns. Fury boiled inside me. That useless girl Olivia must have tied Chloe up just so she could have her little tryst in our apartment. How dare she? Chloe lifted her head, her tear-filled eyes locking onto mine. "Ethan? What? What are you doing home?" Her voice was incredibly raspy. My heart wrenched in pain. How long had she been crying? I rushed over, lifted her gently, and carried her back to the bed. I pulled her into my arms, stroking her damp hair tenderly. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I came back so late. I let you go through this. If the neighbor hadn't messaged me, I wouldn't have known this psychopath of a caregiver was doing this to you." Chloe's body suddenly stiffened, and she pulled back slightly from my embrace. "The neighbor? What did they tell you?" Seeing the sheer panic in her eyes only made my chest ache more. "Chloe, Olivia has been bringing a man here for the past 5 days. Has she been locking you up like this the whole time? Why didn't you tell me? Did she threaten you?" Chloe let out a long, shuddering breath, then buried her face back into my chest. "Ethan, you're so busy at the hospital. You save lives. I didn't want you to worry about me. And the man she brought, he's huge, muscular, and looks so dangerous. I was terrified you'd get into a fight with him and get hurt." Listening to her soft, fragile whimpers, my self-loathing reached its peak. My beautiful wife had endured such abuse at home just to keep me focused on my work. At the same time, my hatred for Olivia reached a boiling point. I pulled out my phone to dial 911. But before I could hit call, Chloe snatched the phone out of my hand. She gripped my hand tightly, her eyes begging me. "Please don't. If the police get involved, everyone in the building will know. They'll look at me with pity. I can't take that." Looking at her fragile, pleading face, I felt utterly defeated. Chloe had been paralyzed for years. Despite the expensive experimental medications and my daily physical therapy sessions with her, there was never any improvement. To pay for her treatments, I worked endless overtime, leaving her alone more and more. I had watched her grow increasingly insecure and fragile over the years. To avoid the pitying stares of strangers, she hadn't left the apartment in months. She wouldn't even go to the clinic for her checkups. It was my fault. I wasn't rich enough, and I wasn't a good enough doctor to cure her. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from downstairs, followed by a car alarm blaring and 2 men shouting obscenities at each other. Instinctively, I moved toward the window to check. But Chloe gripped my hand even tighter. She pulled me down to her, burying her face back into my chest. "Ethan, I'm so scared. Please don't leave me. Not even for a second." I stopped. I wrapped my arms around her again. Nothing in this world was more important than Chloe. I held her in bed until her breathing slowed, and she drifted off to sleep. Gently, I slid my arm out from under her, walked into the bathroom, filled the tub with ice-cold water, and climbed in. Chloe and I had never consummated our marriage. On countless sleepless, agonizing nights, this was how I calmed my burning desires, shivering in a tub of ice water. To me, sacrificing my own needs was just another way of loving her. But tonight the bathroom smelled strange. A foul, metallic, fishy odor lingered in the air, giving me a splitting headache. I searched around and finally traced the smell to the trash can. Buried at the bottom was a pair of lacy red women's underwear. The anger I had just suppressed flared up again. That damn caregiver, Olivia. She actually used our bathroom for her dirty deeds. The next morning, I threw the trash out. I gave Chloe her sponge bath, changed her underpads as I did every day, and prepared to leave for work. But Chloe was acting strange. She seemed exceptionally clingy. Ethan, when will you be home today? Normally, she never asked, fearing she'd distract me. She was clearly still traumatized by yesterday. I stroked her hair gently. I'll come straight home after my shift. I'll make your favorite, creamy Tuscan chicken. Despite wanting to stay, I had to leave. Chloe's experimental meds were running low, and I needed to find a freelance gig to cover the next batch. As I drove around the corner of our street, my phone rang. It was Olivia. Before I could even speak, she screamed through the receiver. Dr. Carter, did you seriously blackball me in the agency for bringing men over? How am I supposed to get another job now? If you have this much free time, you should watch your own wife. Stop acting like a clueless idiot. I hadn't even tracked her down yet, and she had the nerve to call and yell at me? But what did she mean by that last sentence? Before I could ask, she slammed the phone down. I spammed her on Snapchat, but she blocked me instantly. A cold, uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. Unable to shake it off, I called in sick and turned the car around. When I pulled into our apartment's underground garage, I found my assigned parking spot occupied. After calling the number on the windshield several times, a tall, muscular man with a cast on his leg limped over. He was panting heavily, and I noticed fresh hickeys peppering his neck. I recognized him. He was the jerk who always stole my parking spot. When I complained, he didn't even apologize. He just gave me a menacing glare, got into his car, and drove off. It wasn't even noon, and I had already been yelled at twice. My mood was in the gutter. Walking into the apartment, the sight of Chloe sleeping peacefully calmed my nerves. I gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. That's when I noticed a faint smudge of pink lipstick on the corner of her mouth. I hadn't applied any makeup on her this morning. She never wore makeup at home. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Instinctively, my eyes drifted down to Chloe's thighs. Over the years, despite my daily massages, her muscles should have shown some signs of atrophy from lack of use. But as I stared at her legs, I realized something I had been too blind to notice before. Her thighs were as firm, toned, and perfectly shaped as they were before the accident. Suddenly, her eyes fluttered open. She looked startled to see me. Ethan? Why are you back? Is there something wrong with my legs? I quickly shook my head, forcing a smile. No, nothing. I just realized I forgot to do your physical therapy massage this morning. I couldn't stop worrying, so I came back. She giggled and pinched my nose, but then her face fell, and tears began to pool in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Ethan. It's all because I'm a useless cripple. I make your life so hard. In the past, my heart would have broken. I would have held her tight and told her how much I loved her. But today, Olivia's warning, the muscular man with the cast, and the perfect shape of her legs created a dark cloud of suspicion in my mind. Was it possible that Chloe's legs had already healed? To find out the truth, I went to the bathroom, wrung out a towel in scalding hot water, and walked back to the bedroom. Let's do a quick hot compress first, I said casually, pressing the steaming towel directly onto her thigh. The intense heat turned her skin bright red instantly. I watched her face closely. Her expression didn't change at all. She kept smiling up at me, warm and affectionate. A wave of intense guilt washed over me. I felt like a monster. Chloe loved me so much, and here I was, testing her and hurting her. I was disgusting. Panicked, I grabbed the burn ointment and began applying it to her skin with trembling hands. As blister after blister began to form on her fair skin, tears of pure remorse streamed down my face. Chloe, I'm so sorry. It's my fault. Chloe paused, then slowly used her arms to lift her upper body, pulling my head into her lap. It's okay, silly. I can't feel anything anyway. It doesn't hurt. She reached into the nightstand, pulled out a carton of milk, inserted a straw, and handed it to me. You look exhausted, babe. Drink some milk and take a nap. You need to rest. My heart warmed. I took a big gulp. But the moment the liquid hit my tongue, a faint, bitter aftertaste sent a chill down my spine. As a doctor, I knew that taste instantly. It was a dissolved sleeping pill. Chloe was staring at me, her eyes locked onto mine waiting. I didn't know how she had gotten her hands on the pills, but I knew one thing. Right now, she desperately needed me to pass out. To play along, I pretended to yawn heavily. I need to use the bathroom first, I mumbled. I rushed to the bathroom, shoved my fingers down my throat, and threw up every drop of the milk. Then, I walked back, stumbled onto the bed, and closed my eyes, letting my breathing fall into a deep, heavy rhythm. After a few minutes, I felt Chloe lean over me. She waved her hand in front of my face. Once she was absolutely sure I was dead to the world, she let out a cold, disgusted sneer. Useless simp. Through the tiny slit of my eyelids, I watched my paralyzed wife throw back the blanket, swing her legs over the edge of the bed, and stand straight up on her own 2 feet. She walked over to the closet, changed into a skin-tight, sexy dress, slipped into a pair of high heels and walked out the door. The moment I heard the elevator door slide shut, I bolted out of bed. I grabbed my keys and followed her. Keeping my distance, I hopped into a taxi and trailed her Uber. Chloe's Uber pulled up to a trendy, upscale street. She walked straight toward a vending machine tucked into a dark alley. She pressed a sequence of buttons, and the machine swung outward like a door. It was a hidden speakeasy. I waited a minute, copied her actions and slipped inside. The club was dimly lit, packed with people, and pulsing with loud electronic music. I had never been to a place like this and felt completely out of place. After pushing through the crowd, I finally spotted her in a VIP booth in the corner. Chloe was draped over a tall, muscular guy, her fingers tracing his jawline playfully. It was the jerk from the garage. My mind reeled. Was that why he always parked in my spot? So he could keep tabs on when I was home or at work? The humiliation of being cheated on burned hot in my chest. I clenched my fists and walked toward the booth. But as I reached the heavy velvet curtain of their booth, Chloe's voice drifted out. "Babe, I think Ethan is starting to suspect something. He's been acting really weird lately. It's all because of that nosy neighbor. She actually Snapchatted him to complain. What a bitch. And because of her, you had to jump out of my bedroom window and break your leg. I'm so sorry, baby." The man chuckled, pulling her closer. "What are you scared of? If he finds out, we just throw it in his face. He's just a broke, pathetic resident doctor. What's he gonna do? Fight me? You're too hot to be stuck with a loser like him anyway." He planted a wet kiss on her lips, and Chloe giggled, slapping his chest playfully. "Stop it. If it weren't for revenge, I would have divorced him years ago. If he hadn't botched my surgery back then, I wouldn't have spent years recovering. All my suffering is his fault. You think he's staying with me out of love? He's just trying to ease his own guilty conscience. But you're the smart one, babe. Getting your buddy at the rehab center to fake the bills? We split the therapy money he pays, and my secret savings account is looking very nice right now." The man laughed loudly. "Well, you're the mastermind who came up with the plan to get rich off his guilt." Their laughter echoed in the booth, but everything went dead silent in my mind. I stood there, frozen. The thumping bass of the music sounded like a chorus of mockery, needles piercing my brain. I never could have imagined that this was how Chloe saw me. Years ago, when I first met Chloe, it was my first year as a resident. She had been in a horrific car crash. When she was wheeled into the ER, her legs were a mangled, bloody mess. She needed immediate, highly specialized surgery. But the moment her parents heard the projected cost, they hesitated. "Even with the surgery, she might still end up paralyzed, right?" her father had asked. "We can't afford this. We have a son to think about." Even when I offered to help them set up a payment plan through the hospital, they flatly refused to sign the consent form. I couldn't bear to see a young girl lose her legs forever, because of her parents' selfishness. So driven by my duty as a doctor, I made a risky decision. I pushed her into the OR and performed the surgery, taking full responsibility. Although I saved her legs, the delay caused by her parents meant she still required extensive rehabilitation, and a full recovery was never guaranteed. For years, I gave up opportunities to study abroad, turned down promotions, and skipped conferences just so I could stay by her side, massaging her legs and taking care of her every need. But her legs just wouldn't get better. Eventually, she told me she wanted to give up, and the rehab center staff subtly suggested I stop bringing her in. I had carried that guilt for years. I suffered from insomnia, constantly blaming myself for not being a better doctor. And all this time, they were just playing me for a fool to steal my money. The music in the speakeasy throbbed through the floorboards, a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to rattle the teeth in my skull. Behind the heavy velvet curtain, I stood as still as a corpse in a morgue. My mind didn't shatter, it froze. Years of emergency room training, of suppressing panic when an arterial bleed sprayed across my scrubs, of keeping my hands steady while a life slipped away under my fingers, took over. Panic was a luxury for people who had time to feel. Right now, I needed survival. Slowly, silently, I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My hands didn't shake. I opened the voice recorder app, held the microphone close to the gap in the curtain, and tapped the glowing red circle. And the best part, Marcus's deep, gravelly voice bounced off the leather upholstery of the booth, is that he actually thinks he's paying a top-tier physical therapist. My cousin at the clinic marks up the invoices by 300%, generates a fake receipt, and wires your 60% cut directly to your offshore account. Chloe let out a high-pitched melodic giggle, a sound I hadn't heard from her in 6 years. At home, her laughter was always muted, frail, as if drawing a full breath was too painful for her fragile body. "He's such a pathetic loser," Chloe purred, her voice dripping with poison. "You know he used his entire annual bonus last month to buy that experimental nerve regeneration serum?" It was literally just saline and vitamin B12. I bought a Chanel bag with that money. God, you're evil, Marcus chuckled, followed by the wet, sickening sound of an open-mouthed kiss. I love it. I learned from the best, babe, Chloe replied softly. He spent 6 years torturing himself because he thought he ruined my life. Every time he looked at my legs, he looked like a kicked dog. It was so easy. All I had to do was sigh, shed a few tears, and he'd hand over his paycheck, scrub my floors, and apologize for existing. I let the phone record for 3 more minutes. 3 minutes of brutal, undeniable, crystal clear proof. When I had enough, I saved the file, backed it up directly to my private cloud server, and locked my phone. Then, stepping backward into the shadows of the crowded, flashing nightclub, I retreated through the hidden vending machine door and stepped out into the night. The cool, damp city air hit my face like a slap. I stood in the alleyway taking deep, measured breaths. The guilt that had weighed on my chest like a 200-pound block of lead for 6 years was gone. It hadn't evaporated into forgiveness. It had burned away into cold, surgical ash. I wasn't a botched surgeon who had crippled an innocent girl. I was a man who had saved a life, only to be parasitized by the very creature he dragged out of the wreckage. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had previously blacklisted. It rang 3 times before a sharp, furious voice answered. I told you to leave me alone, Dr. Carter. I'm already talking to a lawyer about wrongful termination. Olivia, I interrupted, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I'm standing outside the alley on 4th Street. I know everything. I know about the red underwear. I know about the man in my garage. And I know Chloe isn't paralyzed. Silence stretched over the line. Olivia's sharp breathing was the only sound. Meet me at the 24-hour diner on Elm Street in 10 minutes, I said quietly. I'm going to fix what I did to you, and then you're going to help me destroy them. The fluorescent lights of the diner buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, sterile glow over the Formica table. Olivia sat across from me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring at me with deep mistrust. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. You're not playing me, are you? She snapped, her voice trembling slightly. Because if this is some sick game to cover for your freak of a wife. Without a word, I laid my phone on the table, opened the audio file, and pressed play. Marcus and Chloe's voices filled the quiet booth. Olivia's eyes widened with every passing second. When the audio reached the part where Chloe bragged about framing Olivia to keep her from blowing their cover, Olivia let out a sharp, shuddering gasp. That psycho, Olivia whispered, her knuckles turning white as she clutched her coffee cup. She intentionally dropped her underwear in your bathroom. She knew I noticed her walking when you were on night shifts. She told me if I said a word, she'd tell you I tried to assault her or steal her jewelry. And then she made you blackball me. I know, I said. I pulled out my checkbook, something I rarely used, and wrote a check for $20,000. I slid it across the table. Olivia stared at the check, then up at me. What is this? This covers your lost wages, the damage to your reputation, and a formal retainer, I said steadily. Tomorrow morning, I am calling the home care agency. I will personally inform the board that I was misled, clear your name, and ensure you receive a full reinstatement and a glowing recommendation. But in exchange, I need your testimony. Olivia looked at the check, then at the phone, and finally into my eyes. The anger on her face slowly hardened into a bitter, dangerous resolve. I don't just want my job back, Dr. Carter, she said, her voice dripping with ice. I want to watch her burn. Good, I said, leaning back. Because the fire starts tomorrow. Before returning home, I made one more stop. The medical records archive at St. Jude's Hospital, where I had performed Chloe's emergency surgery 6 years ago. As a senior resident, I still had administrative access to the vault. I spent 2 hours pulling the original physical charts from that night, files that hadn't been digitized. There it was, yellowed with age, bearing the official stamp of the hospital's legal department. Refusal of treatment and financial disclaimer. Signed 6 years ago by Chloe's father, Arthur Miller. Patient's family explicitly refuses emergency orthopedic stabilization due to cost. Dr. Ethan Carter proceeding under emergency exemption clause, assuming personal professional liability. Attached to it were my own surgical notes from 6 in the morning, after 12 straight hours in the OR. Complex bilateral femoral reconstruction successful. Severe nerve compression. Relieved. High probability of full motor recovery with structured physical therapy. Patient's family refused post-operative rehab funding. I had paid for her initial 3 months of physical therapy out of my own pocket, using my meager resident stipend. Her parents had abandoned her at the hospital, taking her younger brother to a private school in another city. I had taken her in, carried her, loved her, and blamed myself for the minor residual limp she was supposed to have worked off years ago. She hadn't just lied to me. She had rewritten history to make her savior her prison guard. I took high-resolution photos of every page, sealed the originals in a tamper-evident evidence bag, and locked them in my car's glove compartment. It was 4 a.m. when I finally unlocked the door to my apartment. The living room was quiet. I walked into the bedroom. Chloe was lying in bed, fast asleep, her breathing soft and rhythmic. Her designer dress was neatly hung. In the closet, her high heels were tucked beneath a pile of old blankets in the back. I stood by the side of the bed, looking down at her. For 6 years, I had looked at this woman with an ache in my heart so deep it felt like a physical illness. Tonight, looking at her, I felt nothing at all. She was just a tumor in my life, and I was finally ready to excise her. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and washed my hands with surgical soap, scrubbing until the skin was raw. The next morning, I woke up at 7 a.m. as usual. When I walked into the bedroom carrying a tray of oatmeal and fresh fruit, Chloe was lying on her back, staring at the ceiling with a look of delicate, long-suffering misery. "Good morning, babe," she murmured, her voice raspy, instantly slipping into her role. "My legs are aching so badly today. The weather must be changing." "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I said, setting the tray on her lap with a warm, gentle smile. "Eat up. I have a big surprise for you today." Chloe paused, a spoon halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flicked up to mine, sharp and watchful. "A surprise? What kind of surprise?" "Well," I sat on the edge of the bed, stroking her hair. She flinched slightly, though she tried to hide it. "I know how much you've been struggling with your recovery. So yesterday, I spoke with the chief of medical affairs at my hospital. He managed to secure a spot for you with Dr. Henrik Vance." Chloe's spoon hit the bowl with a quiet clink. "Dr. Vance? Who is that?" "He's the world's leading neuroorthopedic specialist," I said, my voice filled with rehearsed, breathtaking enthusiasm. "He's visiting from Switzerland for the annual International Medical Summit next Friday. He agreed to do a live, open-panel diagnostic evaluation of your legs in front of the hospital board." The color instantly drained from Chloe's face. "Live evaluation? In front of the board?" "Yes," I beamed, grasping her cold hands. "If he approves your case, the hospital's charity foundation will fully cover a new European surgical procedure. You won't have to spend another dime on those sketchy local rehab bills. Isn't that amazing?" "No," Chloe practically yelled, pulling her hands out of mine. Seeing my startled expression, she quickly softened her tone, squeezing her eyes shut and forcing tears to pour down her cheeks. "I mean, Ethan, no, please. You know how terrified I am of hospitals. The last time I was on an operating table, my life was ruined. I can't go through that trauma again. I just want to stick to my current rehab program with Brock. It's working slowly. I can almost feel my toes." "Brock. So that was the lover's name." "Chloe, Brock's clinic has been billing us $8,000 a month for 2 years, I said, letting a touch of stern, loving concern bleed into my tone. "And there's been zero objective neurological progress. Dr. Vance is the best in the world. If anyone can make you walk again, it's him." I said, "No, Ethan." Chloe snapped, her delicate facade cracking. "Are you saying I'm a burden to you? Are you trying to parade me around like a circus freak in front of your colleagues just to show everyone what a dutiful husband you are?" "Chloe, that's not what I—" "Get out," she sobbed, throwing her pillow at me. "Get out. I don't want your oatmeal, and I don't want your fancy doctor. Leave me alone." I stood up, putting on an expression of deep hurt and resignation. Okay, I'm sorry. We won't do it if it upsets you so much. Just rest, okay?" I picked up the tray and walked out, closing the bedroom door behind me. The moment the door clicked shut, my hurt expression vanished. I pulled out my phone and texted a contact I had established an hour ago, Mr. Harrison, the senior fraud investigator for Pacific Mutual Insurance. "Ethan, the target has officially rejected independent medical evaluation. Proceed with Phase 2 of the financial audit." Harrison. "Understood, Dr. Carter. We've flagged all reimbursements sent to Sunnyvale Rehabilitation Services over the past 36 months. The subpoenas for Brock Vance and his clinic's bank records have been issued." I smiled coldly. Chloe thought she was playing a game of emotional leverage. She didn't realize I was setting up a forensic net. Every dollar she had stolen from me, every fake invoice Brock had generated, was about to become a federal mail and wire fraud charge. As I put on my coat to head to the hospital, a heavy knock sounded at the front door. I opened it. Standing in the hallway was Marcus, or Brock, wearing his gym clothes, his legs still wrapped in that stupid, fake cast. He stood tall, towering over me, trying to use his physique to intimidate me just as he had in the parking garage. "Dr. Carter, Brock sneered, leaning heavily against the doorframe. We need to talk about my parking spot. And your wife's bill. I looked at Brock. Up close, I could see the faint yellowing of a fading hickey. On his neck, the one Chloe had given him yesterday in the speakeasy. Brock, right? I said smoothly, stepping out into the hallway and pulling the door shut behind me so Chloe wouldn't hear. Look, I apologize about the parking spot incident earlier. I've been under a lot of stress. Brock blinked, clearly expecting me to be hostile. Seeing my submissive posture, his shoulders relaxed, and a smug, condescending grin spread across his broad face. Yeah, well, you should be stressed, Brock grunted, crossing his massive arms. Your wife's recovery is at a critical junction. The neural pathway stimulation we're doing at Sunnyvale requires specialized equipment. The monthly fee is going up to $12,000 starting next week. $12,000? I gasped, putting my hands on my head in engineered panic. Brock, I don't have that kind of cash liquid. I'm already working 80 hours a week at the hospital. Well then figure it out, Doc, Brock sneered, leaning in close, his breath smelling faintly of cheap cologne. Unless you want Chloe to stay a cripple for the rest of her life? She told me how much you blame yourself for her surgery. If you cut her funding now, that's on your conscience, isn't it? I stared at him. It took every ounce of my willpower not to drive my thumb directly into his carotid artery. I have a private investment portfolio, I stammered, making my voice shake. It's worth about $150,000. It matures in 3 days. I was saving it for a down payment on an accessible house for Chloe. Brock's eyes practically lit up with green dollar signs. He tried to mask his greed, but his lip twitched. $150,000, huh? Brock cleared his throat. Look, if you pay for a full year of intensive therapy up front, in cash or certified wire, I can get my clinic director to give you a 20% discount. But I need the confirmation deposit by Friday. Friday? I swallowed hard, looking terrified. That's the day of the hospital's annual charity gala. Then bring the wire receipt to the gala, Brock said, patting my shoulder with a heavy, mock-friendly slap that nearly knocked me back. I'll be there. My clinic is one of the minor sponsors. You bring the proof of payment and I'll make sure your wife gets the special care she deserves. Okay, I whispered, lowering my head. Okay, Brock. I'll do it. Just please, don't stop treating her. Good boy, Doc, Brock chuckled, turning on his heel and limping down the hallway toward his apartment. See you on Friday. I watched him go. The moment he turned the corner, I pulled a small micro camera off the decorative wreath hanging beside my front door. It had been recording the entire interaction in 4K resolution, complete with Brock's extortion attempt and his uninjured, perfectly balanced stride when he thought I wasn't looking. I uploaded the footage to the shared file with Investigator Harrison and my divorce attorney, Marcus Vance, no relation to Brock, thankfully. Attorney Vance. This is beautiful, Ethan. Extortion, medical fraud, and conspiracy. Combined with the speakeasy recording, Chloe won't just lose the divorce, she's looking at 5 to 7 years in a state penitentiary. Ethan, make it 10. What about the hospital board? Attorney Vance. Dr. Vance and the chief of surgery have reviewed your original 6-year-old surgical files and the insurance audit. They are horrified by what you've been subjected to. The board has approved the public presentation for Friday night at the gala. I closed my phone and looked back at my front door. Inside, my paralyzed wife was probably lying in bed, smiling to herself, thinking about how her muscle-bound lover had just bullied her gullible husband into handing over another $150,000. She thought Friday night was going to be her grand payout. She had no idea it was going to be her execution. The next 3 days passed in a strange, surreal quiet. I played the part of the devoted, desperate husband to perfection. I brought Chloe her meals, massaged her perfectly healthy, toned legs every evening, and listened quietly as she feigned pain, insecurity, and tragic dependence. Ethan, she whispered on Thursday night, lying in my arms, her fingers tracing my jawline. Are you sure about transferring your investment money to Brock's clinic? That was your life savings. Anything for you, Chloe, I said, kissing her forehead, feeling a cold spike of disgust travel down my spine. If there's even a 1% chance it helps you walk, every penny is worth it. She smiled, burying her face in my chest to hide her triumphant grin. You're so good to me, Ethan. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, I murmured. Tomorrow night at the gala, everything changes. I'm so proud of you, she cooed. Even though I can't go to the gala because of my legs, I'll be waiting for you at home. Bring me back some of those chocolate truffles you mentioned. Oh, but you are going, Chloe, I said gently. She froze. What? I arranged it with the event committee. I smiled warmly down at her. They're presenting me with the Humanitarian Service Award for my night shift work and my dedication to family care. The chief specifically requested that my brave, resilient wife be there in the front row. A wheelchair-accessible limousine is picking you up at 7. Chloe's eyes panicked. Ethan, no. I don't have anything to wear. I haven't been in public in months. My social anxiety. I already bought you a dress, I interrupted, walking over to the closet and pulling out a garment bag. I unzipped it to reveal a stunning, backless crimson gown, the exact color of the lacy underwear I had found in the bathroom trash can. Red is your favorite color, isn't it? I asked, eyeing her closely. I saw a pair just like this in your drawer recently. Chloe swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously. Ah yes, it's beautiful. Thank you, Ethan. Get some rest, sweetheart, I whispered, switching off the bedside lamp. Tomorrow is going to be an unforgettable night. The grand ballroom of the Crystal Palace Hotel was blindingly opulent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm, glittering light. Over 300 of the city's top medical professionals, hospital board members, insurance executives, and wealthy donors. I stood near the stage in a tailored black tuxedo, a glass of sparkling water in my hand. At 7:30 p.m., the double doors of the ballroom opened, and an attendant wheeled Chloe inside. She looked breathtaking. The red dress hugged her curves perfectly, her hair was styled in elegant waves, and her makeup was flawless. She played the part of the tragic, beautiful, wheelchair-bound wife to perfection, offering timid, brave smiles to the guests who looked at her with sympathetic eyes. Sitting 2 tables away was Brock, dressed in a tight velvet suit jacket, sipping champagne and smirking at me across the room. He gave me a subtle thumbs-up gesture, reminding me of the wire transfer receipt he expected me to deliver. At 8:15 p.m., the chief of medicine, Dr. Arthur Sterling, stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Sterling's voice boomed through the speakers. Tonight, as we celebrate the incredible achievements of St. Jude's Hospital, we also honor one of our own. A doctor whose selflessness, dedication, and personal sacrifice embody the very highest ideals of medicine. Dr. Ethan Carter. Applause rippled through the room. Chloe clapped gracefully from her wheelchair, dabbing a tiny, theatrical tear from her eye. Brock raised his glass to me. I walked up the stairs to the stage, standing beside Dr. Sterling. Thank you, Dr. Sterling, I said into the microphone, my voice calm, clear, and resonant. And thank you to the board. Tonight is indeed a night of truth and accountability. I pulled a small remote control from my jacket pocket. For 6 years, I continued, looking directly at Chloe in the front row, I believed I was a failure. I believed a surgical decision I made as a young resident ruined my wife's life. I devoted every hour of my existence, every dollar I earned, to fixing what I thought I had broken. A soft, sympathetic murmur passed through the crowd. Chloe gave a small, tragic nod, playing along. However, I said, clicking the remote, medicine is built on objective evidence. And tonight, I would like to share a remarkable medical miracle with you all. The massive digital screens behind the stage flickered. Instead of a medical presentation, the high-definition video from the speakeasy began to play. The audio roared through the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system. And the best part is that he actually thinks he's paying a top-tier physical therapist. My cousin at the clinic marks up the invoices by 300%, generates a fake receipt, and wires your 60% cut directly to your offshore account. The ballroom went dead, suffocatingly silent. On the 20-foot screens, the video showed Chloe, wearing a tight, sexy dress, laughing hysterically, standing firmly on her own 2 feet in high heels, kissing Brock, tracing his jawline and calling me a pathetic loser. What is this? Brock roared, jumping out of his chair, his face turning red. Turn that off. That's a deep fake. Shut up, Brock. Dr. Sterling barked into a secondary microphone for security guards, instantly moving to block Brock's exit. The screen flickered again. This time, it displayed the high-resolution scan of the 6-year-old refusal of treatment form signed by Chloe's father, followed by her complete, unedited medical records showing full muscular recovery achieved 4 years ago. Then came the insurance audit. $340,000 in fraudulent medical billing, wired to an offshore account registered under Chloe Miller and Brock Vance. And finally, the video from my front porch, showing Brock walking perfectly without his cast, demanding $12,000 in cash to keep treating a woman who was currently dancing in nightclubs. Gasps of horror, anger, and utter shock erupted across the ballroom. My God, she faked her paralysis for 6 years? They stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. Look at her. She's sitting in that chair right now. Chloe sat in her wheelchair, her face entirely drained of blood, her mouth hanging open. She looked around at the 300 influential people staring at her with disgust, hatred, and horror. Ethan. She whimpered, her voice cracking, her hands shaking violently against the armrests. Ethan, please. It's a misunderstanding. I was scared you'd leave me if I got better. I did it because I loved you. I stood at the podium, looking down at her with cold, surgical detachment. You didn't stay in that chair out of love, Chloe, I said softly into the microphone, my voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. You stayed in that chair because it was easier to leech off my guilt than to stand on your own 2 feet. I clicked the remote one last time. The double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. 4 uniform officers from the state police and 2 investigators from the district attorney's financial crimes division marched down the red carpet. Chloe Miller? Brock Vance? The lead detective called out, pulling out 2 signed arrest warrants. You are under arrest for grand larceny, insurance, fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Stand up. Brock tried to bolt toward the side exit, but 2 security guards tackled him to the marble floor, slamming his face against the polished tile and snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. Chloe, you bitch. Brock screamed as he was pinned down. She came up with the plan. She came to my clinic 4 years ago and asked me how to fake the nerve test. It was all her. Shut up. Shut up. Chloe shrieked, her voice turning feral. The lead detective walked over to Chloe's wheelchair, looking down at her with sheer contempt. Are you going to stand up on your own, Ms. Miller? The detective asked dryly. Or do we need to carry you to the squad car? Tears of pure, unadulterated humiliation, rage, and horror streamed down Chloe's face, ruining her expensive makeup. She looked at me one last time, begging with her eyes, looking for any shred of the gullible, guilty husband who used to wipe her tears and warm her blankets. She found nothing. Just the cold, unyielding gaze of a man who had finally excised his tumor. With 300 cameras flashing and smartphones recording her every move, Chloe Miller slowly, shakingly pushed herself up from the wheelchair. She stood straight up on her own 2 feet, dressed in her crimson gown, and was promptly handcuffed in front of the entire medical establishment of the city. 2 months later, the morning sun filtered brightly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office at St. Jude's Hospital. I sat at my desk, dressed in a crisp lab coat, reviewing the surgical schedule for the afternoon. On the lapel of my coat was a new badge, Dr. Ethan Carter, Associate Head of Orthopedic Surgery. A quiet knock sounded at the door. Olivia stepped inside, carrying a stack of patient files. She looked healthy, vibrant, and confident, wearing the navy scrubs of a senior surgical coordinator. Morning, Dr. Carter, she smiled, setting the files on my desk. The 2 p.m. femoral reconstruction case is prepped and ready. Also, your lawyer called. Thanks, Olivia. I smiled, picking up my mug of black coffee. What did Marcus say? The plea bargains were officially rejected, Olivia reported, a touch of dark satisfaction in her voice. Brock got 6 years in federal prison for insurance, fraud, and extortion. His cousin at the clinic lost his license and is doing 4. And Chloe, 7 years, Olivia said cleanly, plus a civil judgment ordering the complete seizure of her offshore accounts, her parents' assets that were bought with stolen money, and her Chanel collection. Everything is being liquidated to reimburse you and the insurance fund. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling a profound, deep sense of peace settle over my shoulders. Good, I murmured. Oh, and one more thing, Olivia added, turning at the door with a slight smirk. Her lawyer tried to file a motion claiming she was suffering from psychological distress in prison, and asked if you'd sign a character reference to move her to a low-security facility. I raised an eyebrow. And what did Marcus tell them? He sent them a copy of your original surgical notes from 6 years ago, Olivia chuckled, with a note that said, Dr. Carter has already saved her life once. He is officially off duty. I laughed, a real, genuine, light-hearted laugh that echoed off the glass walls of my office. After Olivia left, I stood up and walked over to the window. The city below was bustling under a bright blue sky. The air was clear, the horizon was endless, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight on my back. I put on my stethoscope, stepped out of my office, and walked toward the operating room to save a life that actually wanted to be saved.